Just let it wash over me. I've never felt good a day in my life. I feel bad all the time, and I'm addicted to it, and I love it, and I don't want to feel good. Have you ever thought about that? How about you try that one on for size? I've been in pain every day of my life. I've been miserable every day of my life. Some truth to that. Not 100% true, but there's some truth to that.
Welcome back to Posting Through It. Thanks for joining us another week. I'm Jared.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Amanda.
Following multiple listener requests from a bunch of sick puppies that you guys all are, this episode's all about Nick Fuentes. In mid-May, you may have seen a heavily circulated NPR story about the Trump administration's ties to antisemitic extremists, and it highlighted a skinny guy. He's got oily hair, and his name is Paul Ingrassia. Now, Paul Ingrassia isn't just anyone. He was the White House liaison to the Department of Homeland Security, and now he's been nominated to lead the U.S. Office of Special Counsel, which is a government ethics office that enforces the Hatch Act, provides protections to whistleblowers. Should note this is different from the special counsels at the Department of Justice, where people like Robert Mueller and Jack Smith worked on cases surrounding Trump. He has to be confirmed by the Senate for this position, but he's still closer to power than any of us will ever be. Here's our guest for today, Amanda, talking to NPR about where she'd seen Paul Ingrassia.
A few weeks later, Moore sent Ingrassia a direct message on social media and asked about the rally. Ingrassia wrote back, basically pleading ignorance. He said he'd only walked past there for maybe 5 minutes out of curiosity, and as soon as he figured out what the rally was, he left. Did you find Paul Ingrassia's response to you credible?
No, not at all.
For one thing, Moore was recording, and based on her footage, which she shared with us, she estimates he was there for closer to 20 minutes, not 5. And there's another live stream video showing Ingrassia smiling as he walked right up to Fuentes before his speech. Plus,
Amanda saw Ingrassia at an event hosted by the subject of today's episode, Nick Fuentes. And it's emblematic of why Nick warrants an episode of this much detail and this much length. No matter what you may think of this guy, few open admirers of Adolf Hitler have ties as deep to the mainstream MAGA movement. Arguably, Nick has grown even more influential since the time Trump first took office back in 2017, which is where he kind of first came onto the scene and made his waves.
So you'll often hear people cite the fact that Trump hosted Fuentes for dinner as a way to make Trump look bad, right? Like he's close to extremists. That is absolutely true. Trump had Fuentes for dinner, not to eat, but as a guest, alongside Ye, the rapper Ye, who has appeared on I don't know how many of our recent episodes.
I think that this has got to be like the 6th one.
Yeah, gotta be. And this was in November 2022. The New York Times story published at the time suggested that Nick and Don got along quite well. It said, during the dinner, according to a person briefed on what took place, Mr. Fuentes described himself as part of Mr. Trump's base of supporters. Mr. Trump remarked that his advisors urge him to read speeches using a teleprompter and don't like when he ad-libs remarks. Mr. Fuentes said Mr. Trump's supporters preferred the ad-libs, at which Mr. Trump turned to the others, the person said, and declared that he liked Mr. Fuentes, adding, "He gets me." Trump later distanced himself from Nick by calling the dinner quick and uneventful and portraying the live streamer as just a guest of Ye's who came along for the ride. Trump never addressed the radical anti-Semitism that differentiates Nick from many of his other mainstream pro-Trump influencers with national name recognition.
So like it or not, and to be clear, we do not like it, Nick Fuentes is a pretty big deal He has 500,000 followers on X, many of them human, and a fan base of self-described Groypers that actually show up to events, actually show up to rallies, buy tickets to his gatherings. And that makes him different from basically any other person you could credibly call a white nationalist in America right now.
He's like David Duke circa 1992, except he's a quarter Mexican, and he's plagued with gossip about his sexuality, which we'll have to address at some point because it's such a big part of his story.
That is unfortunately true. But we need to understand how on earth this happened. How did the national media become forced to talk about a guy who, among many other things you'll hear during this episode, ate his boogers on a live stream? So today, we're trying to answer the question.
Who the hell?
Who the hell?
Who the hell is Nick Fuentes?
Would you rather be dead and not racist, whatever that means, or alive and racist? Me, I prefer to be alive and racist. So if I see that guy walking down the street, I'm not confronting him. I'm getting up and running in the opposite direction. Because of what he looks like. If it was a white guy, I wouldn't do it.
Before we really dive in here, I just want to introduce Amanda. Amanda and I have known each other for a bit. Amanda has met my dog, Pierre, so that puts her in a fairly distinguished category of guests on this show. Amanda, introduce yourself.
Oh, well, my name is Amanda. I spent a year undercover in the far right where I got to meet all kinds of Nick Fuentes fans who are now White House or White House adjacent. And now I'm a journalist who writes about those people.
You've been profiled in media. You have flipped the tables. Now you are writing stories. You do a bunch of great reporting. I mean, the reason people, I think, really understand why somebody like Paul Ingrassia, for example, is so concerning is because of reporting you've done from being actually physically on the ground places, mixed up in the bunch, and just being able to share those observations in a way that really conveys what's important and what is so, just harmful about what is happening in the core of, the Trump movement that has developed in the last decade. So we're really excited to have you. Before we start, I want to hear a little bit more about your encounters with the Groypers specifically. Like, how deep does this go?
I think we got to tell the listeners because some people may not know what the Groypers are yet. So I think, there's a chance at least. I know most of our extremely poisoned listeners do, but I think it's because we're going to have to introduce them in the context of Fuentes.
So who are the Groypers and how did they become your best friends, Amanda?
Well, the Groypers are what followers of Nick Fuentes call themselves. And, I've made some of them lose their jobs. And so they're not big fans of me, but they also can't stop talking to me. So I think it's very confusing for them emotionally. They don't know what to do. When I was at that rally, this rally where I saw Paul Ingrassia, people were coming up to me and they were like, "Oh my God, I follow you on Twitter." And I'm like, "You're a Groyper." Like, what are you doing?
Can I interject a question?
Yeah.
So a lot of the guys, we're gonna talk about this in the episode, friends. But a lot of these guys are like, well, Fuentes himself sometimes identifies as an incel, right? He says he's an incel, and some of his followers presumably do as well. No?
Yeah, they say that.
They say that, yeah, but they may not.
Yeah.
But my point
is, how they say they're Catholic,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, do you think like you being a woman, do you think that like has a sort of disarming quality that sort of impacts that reporting? Because it seems like they are very eager to talk to you, and I don't think your reporting has been fair. But by being fair, it's inherently antagonistic, right? Because it's like you tell the truth about these guys, it's going to be antagonistic. So, like, does it give you sort of an advantage? It's probably coupled also with threats and things like that, because I know what women go through on this beat.
Yeah, absolutely advantage. They just don't know what to do. And like when I'm with them, if they're talking to me about somebody else who's like, a lot of it's like, oh, so-and-so slept with my girlfriend, so I need to snitch on him. And I know that a lot of them tell each other to talk to me if they're going to be doing that. They'll forget I'm not one of them. sometimes once they get over the hurdle of like having to approach me. And then some of the ones who have like personalities, who have the followings, like, they'll take photos with me, they'll like antagonize me, and they'll do it in a very public way. I also go to all of the events and just stand out front or sit out front. I'm not allowed into anything. And I don't mean Groyper stuff. I mean like mainstream, Turning Point, CPAC. I'm not allowed in. But I'm always present. And so I'm always around for their events too. And so it's like, I just become like a known entity in that way, because I'm always in your face. And it's a huge, huge advantage. I mean, that's kind of like, I think, across the board for the far right, I've noticed it's an advantage. And sometimes it's to the point where I've actually been concerned that editors are going to be like, are you working with these guys? Because sometimes they will be so like performative with me.
Yeah.
When I'm like emailing them and I'm saying like, hey, did you say all this stuff about Hitler, before we publish? And I like their responses are just sometimes so wild that I'm like, I've legitimately been worried that people are going to be like, oh, but obviously I'm not working with them. They do like especially the ones that lose their jobs, hate me. And until very recently, Fuentes would rant about me on his show, but he would never say my name. Ever.
Yeah. Well, we'll
call me that Antifa bitch.
We can talk about that a little bit later, but he's very he's kind of savvy about that. Like he knows how some of the game is played, and the people who report on him really drive him crazy. So we can get into that, but I think we want to hear more about your reporting, specifically around 2024 later on in the show. But shall we get started, Jared?
Sure.
All right, so
we need to hop in a time machine and go back to 1998.
So my old ass was actually in college. So if you want to really, I was like, I was very much in college at that point. I was a freshman, but I was there. Anyway, so Nick is born in August of 1998. And he is one of the youngest people we will ever cover, I think, on this show, or at least for now.
Crazy.
Just blows my mind. Like he's closer to my oldest son's age than he is to my age, which is a lot. And he's born in the Chicagoland area. He grows up in LaGrange Park, and it is 80% white, which is a big difference from the 40% white of Chicago itself, or like the heart area of Chicago. Jared, do you want to comment?
It is, as you noted, mostly white, and the people that live there tend to have a pretty decent amount of money. The median household income is north of $100,000, and historically in Chicago, people who have made money in the city have moved out to the northern suburbs and the southwestern suburbs. So this fits into Chicagoland pretty firmly, but it should not be mistaken for having grown up in the city. This is a pretty quiet, well-off suburb, and I can imagine probably a pretty ideal place to grow up as a kid. I mean, It's safe, it's quiet, there's good schools, good public amenities and stuff. It's just like a nice little picture of white suburbia.
Yeah. Nick's background is of interest to me largely because it is one of the first things that other white nationalists attack him for. Not that Latino people aren't part of white supremacist movements and stuff like that. In fact, it's very common. In fact, there's in the neo-Nazi movement in particular, there have been a lot of Latino men, particularly Latino men who identify as white. One person who with South American heritage who comes to mind, for instance, is Joe Jordan, aka Eric Stryker, whose family is all South American immigrants. So in the case of Nick, he is Italian, Irish, and he has a quarter Mexican in his heritage. And you will frequently see people point out that he has that. And you'll also see it sometimes from mainstream Republicans who want to get mad at him and try to discredit him. So it's like a big part of his branding and identity. Obviously, his last name is Fuentes.
And I should note, he also has historically used this as a shield to protect himself under scrutiny, to be like, how could I be a white nationalist when I'm a quarter Mexican? Come on, guys. I mean, it's like the one of the oldest rhetorical tricks in the book, right? I mean, But
Yeah.
anyway.
Well, I could go out with that for a lot of different thoughts coming from a mixed race background myself, but like, let's just continue. In middle school, he describes himself as being an unhappy loner, which I think is a very interesting description. I don't know how real it is, but that's what he says.
Early on, when I was a kid, I basically realized I was like, I want to do what must be done. When I was in like middle school, I'm like, I'll never be happy. So I'll just be significant instead. That's honestly, maybe that sounds LARPy or whatever, but it's true. You know, when I was like 10 or 9 or 8, I was like, yeah, I'm like a loner. I'm just can't really get along with anybody, can't really relate to anybody. I'm not really like anybody. So I'll never fit in. I'll never really feel a sense of belonging. And I'll never be happy, but the good thing is I'm gifted, so I can make a mark on history.
So this unhappy loner gets into politics very, very quickly.
Par for the course, man. With unhappy loners, politics is a great place.
So he gets into it really, really quickly, and he actually serves as the school council president. And he is in debate club and like the Model UN or whatever. And he's actually said that since becoming the Nick Fuentes we know now, so since he came to wear the mask or whatever, since he became the supervillain that we all know, his friends from the Model UN have turned on him.
Now they all hate me. Unfriended me on Facebook, blocked me on Snapchat. They write hit pieces about me. I used to be their best friend. I used to be at their parties. I used to be their leader. Look at me now. Now I'm on the outs. And they all get together and they go to the bar and they gather and they talk about me. They talk about what I'm up to, but I'm not welcome. I'm not with them anymore. Because I chose this life. I chose this life. So, yeah.
He is 15 years old in November 2015. And I think this is interesting here. And I think, Amanda, you can actually some input here. How common are high school boys and, you know, at some of these events or boys that are kind of like either that or on the cusp of college at his events now?
I would say very common. I would say specifically targeted as guests, to be guests.
That makes sense. Well, Nick himself in 2015 in November, 1 year out from the 2016 election, posts the first episode of the Nicholas J. Fuentes show. And this is a trip for folks. It might kind of blow your mind to hear Nick talk about Trump in this context then. Because Nick does his little YouTube show. And my quick review of this is that he's actually got a tremendous amount of broadcasting skill for a little guy. You know, I mean, for 15 years old, he puts the camera on, he keeps talking, and he's relatively impressive. And what's most interesting about this is the fact that Nick actually criticizes Trump for being racist.
What you have to consider about Donald Trump is that he's not an ideologue. He is an opportunist. He's not a conservative, and it doesn't matter what he is because all he wants is power. Now, it's clear that he's not a conservative. If you look at any history of him on the issues, he's been pro-abortion, he's been anti-property rights, he's pro-protectionism in this election. His immigration policy resembles Patrick Starr's. We're going to take the immigrants and push them somewhere else. It's basically ridiculous. Now, Donald Trump is doing so well because he appeals to the Republicans, not in fighting the Democrats, but in fighting the establishment. We haven't fought the Democrats since 2012, since Mitt Romney ran against Barack Obama. Since then, the Republicans have not been fighting the Democrats, but other Republicans, rhinos, Republicans in name only. And Donald Trump has served a very important function in breaking the monopoly of John Boehner, of Paul Ryan, of Reince Priebus, and having people of, by, and for the people they were intended to represent. Now, having said that, Donald Trump has served his function. His time is over. It's time for serious candidates. Let the adults talk, Donald. We don't need the exclamatory phrases, the borderline racist remarks. Now we need real candidates. Now,
just watching that early clip, I mean, it's very clear, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but like, even at 15, I think Nick does I don't want it to come off like I'm giving him credit or something, but like he's a talented speaker. I mean, it's just something that he seems to be naturally good at. You know, he's talking into the camera, looking at the camera the whole time, which is more than I can do, and why I don't do video content
yet.
But you know, sort of the theme of this show, it's very like libertarian, very much just like, you know, in comparing that to today, you can almost see as much of how he has changed, but also the Republican Party in whole. You know, I just that clip of like, all right, Trump, you got to stop it with the racist comments. We need a serious candidate. I mean, Jesus.
Well, one thing he does,
what a change.
One thing he says there basically is that Trump is a fake Republican who only wants power. And flash forward, Amanda, our expert on contemporary Nick, how interested is he in Trump specifically because of his desire for power, or just focus on power, right? I mean, as compared to libertarianism.
Oh yeah, great old libertarian Nick Fuentes.
Nick's college life is really short. He doesn't really get much going. He basically travels east to study at Boston University, and he focuses on politics again and international relations. I'm going to guess that he probably starts Googling Israel a lot at this time based upon the rest of his output. You know, again, it's a theme. He keeps being Nick Fuentes before he's Nick Fuentes. And he becomes, his tune on Trump changes significantly. To such a degree that his show starts to become almost completely focused on Trump and Trump's campaign as Trump becomes inevitable, i.e. Nick is going, you know, rather than sticking to his libertarian principles of 2015, he's going to where the action is. So to credit his tenaciousness, he's been live streaming all through. He really wants to reach people, and he's moved with the rest of his party in the direction of Trump. And that's where he winds up in February 2017. He ends up launching a live stream show called America First. And this is with Right Side Broadcasting Network. Jared, what are they?
Right Side Broadcasting Network. Oh, they are a little startup media company at this time that essentially is just trying to build a podcasting network. I mean, the MAGA movement at that time is really starting to get excited about this idea that like the real news is fake and we have to make our own news. And this is kind of an answer to that. Now, Right Side Broadcasting Network, is getting interviews with officials at Trump rallies and stuff. And that's kind of become their bread and butter. They still have some personalities, but generally have moved away from this, kind of podcast-based model and more into like events coverage generally. But this is just like their bread and butter from the beginning, and eventually they wised up to it, is just live video of Trump rallies. They can't edit it out of context, whatever. Like, because a lot of news networks at the time wouldn't carry the whole thing.
Right.
So they gave a place for Trump supporters to go watch the whole thing. So Nick gets spotted by them and starts producing this commentary show for them.
Right. So we don't usually jump so quickly to like the radical place with somebody, but Nick doesn't really give us much time, is I guess the way you would describe it. Basically, by April, he's on Right Side Broadcasting Network, and he's giving this speech about killing globalists. Right?
Yeah, so we're talking 2 months here.
2 months after getting the job, he's giving a speech about killing globalists. You know, Nick might say, well, the globalists. Now, it would be ridiculous for him to defend this in any case, considering what he says later in his career. But, he might say, oh, the globalists are like, whatever, they're bankers. And it's like that whole Charles Schwab obsession and whatever else. Globalists were pretty much in 2017 a stand-in for Jews in the alt-right movement. It was something they could say online when Twitter was like a little bit less heavily police, well, a little more heavily policed than it is now. So he basically gives this speech talking about killing globalists.
Why don't we hear about it in the mainstream media? Why don't we don't hear about it on Fox News, by the way, either? And why not? Who runs the media? Globalists. Time to kill the globalists. I don't want to not watch CNN. I don't want CNN to go out of business. I don't want CNN to be more honest. I want people that run CNN to be arrested and deported or hanged, because this is deliberate. This is not an accident. It's not like, oh, well, you know, journalists have a liberal bias because they're educated.
So where were you, Amanda, during Unite the Right? I know a lot of people's stories for that day. I was just curious what you're, socially, like we're having a drink here, an imaginary drink. So far, but like
I was in a
keep
liquor
doing it.
store in Gaithersburg, Maryland, for Charlottesville. I was literally working at a liquor store.
Why didn't you say that? You should have said
whiskey
liquor
promo.
store.
Well, I didn't think I was like, but I remember. I
said I was at
Gaithersburg
work. I
liquor
was like,
store. Yeah.
Where?
But then I remembered you don't know what I did for work back then. But like I was doing like a Jim Beam promo. I was handing out samples of like $70 whiskey, and I was like, I don't even want to fucking.
Can we
here.
stitch this in? Like, please, George.
I'll stitch it in.
Yeah, you should. I'm sorry. I should have said it. I didn't expect the question. No one's ever asked me that before. Like,
he appears unsurprisingly on the white supremacist side of this. And he becomes like a kind of a different figure from many of the people who appeared there, Jared, in terms of trajectory, right? You have like your Richard Spencers, your Brad Griffin. Brad Griffin is this neo-Confederate guy, for people who don't know. You have the Right Stuff Network, which is like a white supremacist podcasting group. The folks from there are there. Like, what happened with Nick, Jared?
So Nick got a sympathetic profile in Yahoo News at the time, or, sympathetic, that might be unfair to the profile, but, he basically whips out the violin and starts like singing himself a sob story to this news outlet that he's been bullied and harassed and, oh my God, everyone hates him just because he went to protest what he called cultural genocide, which...
the cultural genocide is very much in the same sphere as the globalist line, where it's like using a slight mask to cover up what you really mean. Like, he doesn't want to say white genocide, so he's saying cultural genocide.
I mean, that's been used forever, from the Proud Boys to fucking Pat Buchanan, right? It's about Western culture. And what they mean is like predominantly white and Christian culture, right? But he's distinct because he's not necessarily in that band of people like Jack Posobiec or Mike Cernovich or whoever that have ostensibly, like, those people are sort of already larger notable figures. By then, they're able to create the perception, however legitimate it is or isn't, generally not, between themselves and what happened at Unite the Right, where Heather Heyer is murdered. And he's different from white nationalists like Mike Penovich or Richard Spencer. He is somewhere in the middle here. He is an attendee. He is young. The way that he tries to portray himself in the aftermath of this is like, well, sure, I mean, generally I agree with some of this stuff. And now, oh boy, I didn't think it would be all of this, and people don't really know who Nick is at this point. And Nick hasn't, at this point, fully evolved into the monster he would become. So by writing it down the middle here, kind of on his own, there's not a lot of people that wrote it down the middle after that event. He somehow like makes it out the other side in one piece, where everybody else is like just dealing with terrible media coverage fallout from their involvement, or in some cases of the organizers, lawsuits and like all kinds of shit. Nick just kind of like, flies out the other side.
Yeah, and basically after 1 year of Boston University, he drops out, citing these death threats. The AP runs what I would describe as a highly questionable interview with him, which is like at length, which I think plays an underrated role in kind of making Nick Fuentes a name brand. Because it is really played flat, and they just let him speak, and they cut back and forth. They show like sort of clips in the video of him kind of on his computer looking at his own Right Side Broadcasting Network show, and then back and forth talking about how much of a victim of left-wing aggression he is, right? Like that he is willing to have a debate. He's willing to have a discussion, but it's actually the left-wingers who don't want to talk, and they just want to kill him.
the ideas that I express, I arrive to based on reading, based on listening to philosophers or thought leaders. And what I say is for the benefit of the country. And I think for the entire political left to decide that anybody to the right of Franklin D. Roosevelt is a Nazi that must be exterminated and beaten and killed and viscerally hated without even being listened to, I think that is probably the most problematic part and perhaps the catalyst for the sort of political violence you're seeing in America today.
Let's move now into post-Charlottesville, sort of this time period in Nick's life, because this ends up being kind of, I think, the closest thing you can find to like a pivot point. So, I mean, in less than the span of a year, we have, these crazy right side broadcasting monologues going to unite the right. I mean, and he just like from the high board at the diving pool goes deep into the white nationalist space. He collaborates with another guy that was in Charlottesville, James Alsop. They had a podcast together. It was called Nationalist Review. They started it a couple weeks after the Unite the Right rally and ran it until about January. It fell apart. Nick essentially claimed that Alsop lacked professionalism, which I find pretty believable, frankly.
Just for anybody who doesn't know who James Alsop is, he was like, for a brief moment, like, this is sort of like, I don't know if he's handsome. Like, certainly, I don't know. He was just not, he didn't look like Mike Penovich, I guess. he was like a presentable Nazi that like, or white nationalist type that was at Charlottesville and kind of like had a brief moment of being kind of hip, I guess.
Yeah, it was like clear he worked out sometimes and like got a haircut once in a while. So it's a low bar here. Yeah. So, but essentially what the conflict kind of boiled down to is that Fuentes wanted to build like a podcasting empire. It was kind of like, well, if I can't do right side broadcasting, we'll do that kind of idea, but for the far right. And he gets frustrated because I guess James is just like showing up late to their recordings. He is not producing at the rate he said he was going to, and just generally wasn't chipping in. And then it really kind of exploded. There was some argument about replacing computer parts that I guess went south. I don't know or care enough to know like who was right and who was wrong in the computer parts debate, but it just gets me. Does anyone know what James Alsop is doing anymore?
No.
No,
I don't know.
Anything?
I mean, he's one of them. He was affiliated with. I previously mentioned the Right Stuff Network. He was. Last I knew, he had a brief stint on there. One of those Right Stuff podcasts. I believe he's living in the Pacific Northwest somewhere, and he just seems to have faded. And it's it's also possible that some of these people just don't want. They may not have been redeemed. They may not change, but they may just not want to be public figures in any way.
Amanda, do you know anything about James Alsop? I feel like post, like 2019, 2020 maybe? Like that's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Yeah, I reached out to him a couple of years ago because I was writing a story about the New York Young Republican Club president who used to let James write for him on his blog. And I was like, do you want to talk? Because I PIMized him and I found him. He is in the Pacific Northwest. I messaged him on LinkedIn and he blocked me. So whatever he's doing. And then he came back on Twitter and then he deleted his own Twitter account because it got reinstated under Musk. That he deleted it very, very fast.
I don't know that James Alsop has been the victim of FBI door knocks, but a lot of those guys have been, and how you react to that is really different for a lot of people. But I've noticed a lot of people who get those type of knocks, and I'm not saying he did. I don't know, actually.
I mean, I also feel like I remember him having a kid at some point. And getting the door knock from the FBI because they're wondering who Charles Bosman is and why you're involved with the podcasting network that was taking all this, seemed to be taking all this money from some weird Russian national who bailed on January 6th. That maybe has a little bit more gravity when you have like two kids staring at you.
To be clear, I don't know that the FBI knocked on his door specifically, but I definitely know that people in the Right Stuff Network experienced that. So, I mean, if he didn't, it would have been.
He heard about it. Yeah,
he certainly heard about it. And they were involved in a lot of, as almost all self-described dissident, that's what they call themselves, dissident groups do. Their lives are like filled with headaches you cannot possibly imagine, right? Basically, this is, and there's no pity party for this, but it's literally when they agree to do this stuff, when they decide this is what they want to do, the activism they want to do, their lives take a pretty shitty turn usually.
So let's keep things moving along. At this point, Fuentes and James Alsop, they go their separate ways. And Nick is really just, he is like independent now. He is not actively collaborating with other people. He's going back to his roots, the Nicholas J. Fuentes show in 2015, but quite a bit darker. Nick's Twitter account is continuing to grow. He is on YouTube. He is on other platforms these days, but he really starts to catch on YouTube. That's growing. He is taking donations and super chats on that platform, making a considerable amount of money, whether he is following his audience or his own ideology or some mix of both. He becomes more and more open to being openly anti-Semitic. So previously, he's using cultural genocide or like globalist, these sort of stand-in words that were popular with the alt-right at the time. But now he's doing more of what they would call naming the Jew. So one thing we want to highlight here, a complete 180-degree turn from his high school broadcast. He tells a openly gay far-right influencer, Lucian Wintrich, that he now explicitly believes in using the state to forge an ideal society, which is about 100 miles west of any libertarian purism that I can think of.
That's why we have to have the state come in. I've just fundamentally shifted away from the idea that the state has to be small or necessarily bad. That's a totally Reagan-esque idea. And if you look, Trump really hasn't embraced that either. He's cut regulations and all that. But what Trump has embraced is like a post-Reagan republicanism, where we're not concerned with the size of government. We're concerned with, is it efficient? Is it competent? Is it executing the will of the people? And as long as that's happening, I'm fine with it. Because the government, Silicon Valley was born of the government because of Air Force contracts. How much technology and economic growth was driven by the military and military innovation and defense spending? You have to embrace that when the government commits to something and does it competently.
Are we really? That's the, what is it, broken window fallacy. You can't say...
that sounded pretty fascist to me.
Around the same time, Nick is looking to be a white nationalist, but without that icky label. This is also from 2018. This is actually my clip from when I was at Right Wing Watch. He's talking to Richard Spencer, big white nationalist, kind of boogeyman of the alt-right. Got a lot of media profiles, was part of Unite the Right. And Nick's objection to the term white nationalist, it's clear from this clip, has nothing to do with ideology, but more of just like, well, that sounds bad. And like people, that's like it's optics, right? It's like, it's a bad look. It's icky to be called that. We should try to call ourselves something else.
I was talking about that earlier today because, of course, there was a big hit piece about me in Right Wing Watch by Jared Holt. We're all a big fan of Jared Holt around here because I attended the American Renaissance Conference this weekend. And, the reason I wouldn't call myself a white nationalist, it's not because I don't see the necessity for white people to have a homeland and for white people to have a country. It's because I think that kind of terminology is used almost exclusively by the left to defame. And I think the terminology and the labels that we use, I don't think we can look at them outside of the context of their connotations in America. Whereas maybe it might be descriptive to call somebody a white nationalist. I think it sort of loses something when an average person hears that and it's almost synonymous with Nazi or villain or whatever. And so I would say I'm a white person. I'm conscious of my white identity, conscious of
nationalism. But
By
I think in a
now,
way it's
Nick
almost
is really
redundant to say-
embodying the alt-right after the alt-right, sort of as the alt-right is starting to fade through legal troubles, infighting, just all kinds of turmoil, is like kind of tearing apart the seams here. And the white nationalist movement, as it existed in that form, kind of ceases to exist and turns into kind of its next phase, white nationalism 2.0 or whatever you want to call it, 3.0, 5.0.
Doesn't matter.
Some version, software update. We're getting new racist people. So he kind of drafts this strategy for how to actually do something post Charlottesville, and it surrounds the Groypers.
We need to
right?
define what the Groypers are first. Now, first things first.
Well, I mean, Amanda did that earlier, said what the Groypers are.
But people don't know what the cartoon is. It's a giant toad. It's a sort of, when we say it's an overweight Pepe the Frog, it looks like a very overweight Pepe the Frog. It's a sort of post Pepe the Frog. So Pepe the Frog was the meme that the alt-right was sharing. They were using that in 2015, 2016. And then when it lost its sting because people started to parody it too much, they made this kind of fat toad called a Groyper. And its origins are very murky.
Yeah, I think Will Sommer described it at the time as like a fatter, more racist Pepe the Frog.
Yes.
But Amanda, I want to ask you, just sort of like around this time, and I guess as it's developed, this sort of branding and, shared identity of Nick Fuentes followers, like how integral do you feel like that's been to Nick's success? And what's his relationship with his audience like in that sense?
He's so mean to them. Oh my God.
He's mean?
He's so mean to them. He's always, every time, super chats, he's always like, what a stupid question. Why would you ask me this? But they love it. They eat it up. They
So he's kind of like a Dom.
Yeah. I think so sometimes, yeah, he's very much, they worship the ground that he walks in many ways. And if you go against anything Nick says, it's very much like Trump. If you go against something that Trump says, you're kind of excommunicated. And I think the Groypers have become more and more of that, where a lot of them won't say opinions that differ with Nick because they're worried about getting kicked out of the club.
My core memory from the early Groyper years is also having to do with some of his fans basically emulating him. I forget his name right now, but there's some Canadian guy that I guess got the idea. Help me out, Amanda. What's this guy's name?
The Canada First guy. Is that who you're talking about?
Yeah. That guy.
Yeah, I'm blanking on his name. I'm sorry. I just think of how it looks like anal first, the shirts with the jacket. That's like
yes,
what
I've seen that.
Think about.
Okay,
I literally.
Well, but like his fans just generally emulate him, and this Canada First guy is the perfect example, and tells you how successful he's been. We don't even remember his name, but just this sort of redheaded Canadian dude basically is I love Nick so much, I'm going to be the Canadian Nick, and goes so far to dress like him, set up a similar live stream background. And then this gets me, because politicians do this with Trump too, starts to emulate his speaking cadence and dialect to the point where I just look at it the same way, like
he's doing an impression.
Like a disappointed father would look at their kid after just terrible.
Well, we'll get back to this in 1 second, but I just want to add something to your point, Jared, which is the Groypers. Again, this cartoon toad was not made for Nick Fuentes fans, but they've adapted this as their name, right? I just want to clarify that for the audience, because in case it wasn't clear, because we sometimes just talk about stuff we know and miss things.
But the white nationalist movement hasn't invented a damn thing in its life. It just steals shit.
Right. Exactly. But of all the people that we cover on the show, or that we write about in general, and we talk about in general, Nick is the only one I know where the Groypers use pictures of Nick as their avatars on Twitter. They literally will just use his face, right? You're nodding, Amanda. Yes, they do. They do that. And you don't see Jack Posobiec fans doing that. It's actually right? There's a very different, like, I mean, I think everybody has their limits, right? Can you imagine doing that?
I'm just thinking I am.
Not even his wife can imagine doing that.
Nick, going back to how we got on the Groyper offshoot, Nick kind of comes up with his idea for sort of a post-alt-right. So this is his quote of sort of his strategy boiled down to the core of it. He says, "Bit by bit, we start to break down these walls and we start to get back in," meaning conservative politics. "And then one day, we become the mainstream. We need to put on the American flag, make the appearance of, hey, maybe we can create this new space. Maybe there are these new guys. They're a little bit out there, but they're not like these other guys," meaning the alt-right. "There's maybe this new category. That's the kind of uncertainty we have to create." Which, strategically, that's pretty savvy, right? Is to reintroduce the same thing as if it is something new and give yourself a chance to reintroduce yourself, right? And in practice, effectively, how this plays out, in 2019, 2020, Charlie Kirk goes on a college campus speaking tour called The Culture War with Charlie Kirk. He's going to UCLA, Texas A&M, those kind of places. And Nick encourages his fans to go to these events and ask Charlie Kirk and guests, like one of them featured Donald Trump Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle, but ask them questions along the lines of what they perceive to be their weaknesses around, namely, immigration and Israel. This would become the Groyper War, the first Groyper War. We'll talk about the second one later.
Rates than Israelis. My question, therefore, why would white Americans send their taxpayer dollars to fund Israel's healthcare while our mothers fight cancer, our brothers die of opioid overdoses, and the news of a coming baby brings not joy and happiness, but grave concern over thousands and thousands in future medical bills? How is that America first?
Thank you for being here tonight. So what is the foreign aid we give Israel spent on?
Bombs for blowing up children. But also their healthcare system, their wall, which we don't have.
That's quite a bold, inaccurate way to depict it.
I'm having a little fun.
So I'll answer the question for you. The foreign aid we give Israel is spent on American defense manufacturers that employ Americans and is built on a joint alliance. It's not built on their domestic welfare programs.
Things keep chugging along. We still have some ground to cover here, but Nick is continuing over the next year or two to grow his audience, to bring in more people, attract more money, more interest. But we said we were going to do it, and this feels like as good a spot as any. It's around this time that gossip about Nick's sexual orientation really starts to affect his career. It really kind of catches on in 2019. He does this, so we're sort of spinning the clock back, not so far, but just a little bit. He does a 10-hour live stream with this streamer called Catboy Cammy.
He also goes by Lolly Socks.
Lolly Socks. Can someone explain this so I don't have to? So there doesn't have to be like an audio recording of me somewhere talking about this?
Yeah, I'll just quickly throw out that Catboy Cammy is a cat boy. Which
what's a cat boy?
Oh man, it's as far as I know, it started as like an internet kind of thing, and it's a sort of, it suggests a queer, feminine male in a cat outfit. Am I wrong? Does anybody have any debate with that? Is that the correct definition of cat boy?
We're gonna get like 50 listener emails that are just like,
I'm not anti-cat. I'm not anti-cat boy here. To be clear, I don't. I'm just saying
cat boys.
I'm not saying it with disgust at all. It's more just in the context of this Nick thing. It makes it a little weird because his fans are so outspoken with their homophobia, right? It's such a weird thing, right? So he has this live stream with Catboy Cammy, aka Lolly Socks, which is, again, you have this like heavily sexualized names here, and the guy is also, for some reason, is also a far-right performer. I don't really understand how, like, his whole deal, Jared.
I don't really understand how they got connected. Like, I know Catboy Cammy has certainly been like racist and anti-Semitic on streams. He's also in the live streaming space, but I don't know much about their relationship or like how it came to the point where Catboy Cammy flies into Chicagoland and spends the day with Nick. Do you know anything, Amanda?
If anybody listening has access to those DMs, please send it to us. Any of us, all of us.
Send it to Amanda. I don't really want to, actually. I'm just doing the end of my book here. I'm just like, you send it to Amanda, please.
Yeah, he does this stream. It becomes like a topic of scrutiny among Nick's detractors. So another thing to note about Nick at this time is as his star is rising, he's also getting the attention of places like Kiwi Farms and just these sort of hubs that kind of became like they kind of really got reported on for the first time around Gamergate and stuff. There's just
a lot of
these
popular right-wing figures got doxxed on there, and they also had their own version of Who the Hell Is episodes, except in forum form.
Yeah, so it's like he becomes in this forum and on some parts of like Chan culture, what they call a lol cow, meaning that he is a personality sort of portrayed as this fumbling doofus that can be milked for laughs. So lol cow, LOL cow. And they really fixate on this Catboy Cammy thing, particularly because Nick's fans are so, as you noted, Mike, just viciously homophobic. And a lot of Nick's commentary is going that direction too. Some other context I'll add around that time. So this was when like I was doing what you're doing, Amanda, which is like going to like everything, right? And the places that I ran into Nick, I just remember seeing him at CPAC. I think this was in 2019. And what was notable to me is who he was hanging out with. Lucian Wintrich, who was at the Gateway Pundit at that time, and Ollie Alexander. These are both conservative personalities who are openly gay and who have, I'm just going to say, enjoyed having access to younger gay Republican men. I think that is the safe way to put it. I remember one time a visibly drunk Lucian Wintrich told me that I would kill as a conservative commentator if I just went to their side because there's like an abundance of twinks on college campuses, ripe for picking up. And I don't remember what I said, probably just something to the effect of like, yeah. Now, it's not to say like having gay friends makes you gay or that I feel like I don't need to say this with our audience, but of course there is nothing wrong with being gay at all. But these people, his sort of like early accolades at this time when he's hanging out with Catboy Cammy are, I think it is relevant context that his sort of gateway into mainstream MAGA is also coming through these openly gay personalities, both of which have really pursued younger gay men. I don't care, but Nick's fans would care a whole fucking lot.
Well, what I think is most important for me is, one, that Nick is hypocritical and he makes money off of a very homophobic, transphobic, aggressively anti-LGBTQ audience. So that's one. The second thing is that the reason why we have to talk about it and we have no choice, because I prefer not to talk about anybody's sexuality if I didn't have to, is because it is just, if you're talking about his history, and you're talking about his history in the movement, right, in the pro-Trump movement and things like that, it has been a huge story of Nick Fuentes, as big as his anti-Semitism has been, these rumors and things, and it'll come up again later on in the show because it just keeps coming up with different things.
What, people calling me gay because I've never had a girlfriend? I think if anything, it makes me less gay. If anything, it makes me not gay. As opposed to less gay. Not that there's any gay, but it makes me not gay. Well, because think about it this way. a gay people do date girls all the time. Real. And when I said on Elijah Schaefer's show, when they said, have you ever been in a romantic relationship? Have you ever had sex with a girl? And I said, no. If you name searched me on Twitter, as I always do, all these gay people are coming out and saying, I've had more girlfriends than Nick. I've had sex with more girls than Nick. So like I said last week, not only is that thinking flawed, but actually it's the reverse. That actually makes me really more heterosexual than anybody.
We're moving closer to January 6th, which becomes like a big moment for everybody in the pro-Trump movement, obviously.
Especially Amanda.
Yeah, Amanda. So there's going to be more of Amanda coming. But so YouTube bans Nick Fuentes in the year before that. And it's a huge problem for him because this is like where he gets his money. And he and a bunch of other people with whom he's affiliated at the time camp out in this gaming website called DLive, which is basically like people sort of stream themselves playing games and comment at the same time. In some ways it's like Twitch, but DLive is more say anything. And it also has this kind of crypto function embedded in it where you get these kind of like, I don't know. It's like little diamonds and like it looks like it's for children. Basically, it looks like a child's gaming website. Owen Benjamin, we can't go too deep on him, but
he was once like an up and coming comedian.
Yes,
and just kind of
got too anti-Semitic.
That could be its
yes
own episode. I've done so much reporting on him, but yeah,
many such cases. And Owen Benjamin is the top earning guy on DLive with this like weird diamond crypto scam thing that they run on that site. And then Patrick Casey is also one. He was formerly leading this group called Identity Europa, which was the kind of your Brooks Brothers looking white nationalists from the Charlottesville era. And they rebranded briefly as American Identity Movement. And then when that fell through, they all kind of just folded into the Groyper Nick Fuentes camp because he had eaten up all the people who were good candidates for Identity Europa in his kind of club. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, just anybody like remotely viable in that space went into the Groyper camp around this time.
Guys who look like they went to college and, didn't necessarily have tons of tattoos, right? That look for white nationalists. So, and then Jaden McNeil. Now, this is a guy who's a kind of Kansas State student who was canceled. One of those type of guys, and he became a personality in the Groyper world with the backing of Michelle Malkin, who is a Filipino American conservative commentator who also writes for white nationalist websites like VDare, a sort of staunch anti-immigrant figure who is also a person of color. A little weird. They call her Mommy Groyper. And she helps Nick launch the first America First PAC, AFPAC. She helps in terms of she's one of the primary speakers. And it's a sort of an attempt to institutionalize the fight Nick had with Charlie Kirk in a more major way. And like the idea of AFPAC, Amanda, I would like you to comment on this, but the idea of it basically is that Nick launches his PAC event across the street from or somewhere not far from where CPAC, the major conservative PAC, holds their event. And it is a place to sort of push up against the strength of CPAC and provide an alternative.
Yeah. And also, I mean, CPAC benefits from it because it brings younger people that don't otherwise show up to CPAC.
I'll also note that Nick's America First PAC also, we see the America First Foundation here. So now Nick has a nonprofit vehicle to accept larger sums of money from people. And also just a note on Michelle Malkin, this is still kind of an era where Nick is becoming like a pretty notable figure in mainstream MAGA, but associating with him is proving to be career suicide. So Michelle Malkin at the time offers Nick a lot. She has connections back to the anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim movement. People with money know who Michelle is. She is, at this time, still occasionally showing up on Fox News, writing columns for major publications. And the blessing from her, I think, goes a long way, right? For Nick at this time. It really kind of bombed what was left of Malkin's career. But like you said, Mike, it is sort of this chance for Nick to institutionalize what prior to this is just an increasingly popular podcast.
Right. So, yeah, Malkin's one of the major speakers at the first one, Patrick Casey, who we mentioned before, and also Scott Greer, who is always around. He's kind of a pro-Trump white nationalist talking head. So COVID starts to pop off. Shout out to COVID. Then Black Lives Matter gets a surge in cultural importance after the death of George Floyd and becomes a major issue for the right, because everybody becomes extremely paranoid about leftist aggression. And also a lot of course, just pure racism, racist fear, etc. Trump begins his re-election campaign. It's filled with missteps, chaos. Things are not going as to plan. They're blaming COVID. They're blaming the BLM riots. That's where Nick actually really starts to hit his biggest stride. And I actually think that if he's doing well now, he cannot possibly be doing as well as he did in the run up to this, just in terms of popularity. He gets a huge underground following at this time because Nick is willing to say the harder truths about MAGA that a lot of these other pundits are not able to do in an election season, and he's a lot more cutthroat about it and a lot more defensive of Trump. And ultimately, when Trump starts rejecting the election results, Nick rejects them too, right? And he is in a camp with white nationalists from Daily Stormer, Andrew Anglin, and a bunch of other folks like that, really pushing the stolen election lie.
Amanda, can you talk a little bit about just this kind of strategy Nick employs? I mean, he outlines it a bit earlier. We read that quote, but a lot of this, if you want to boil it down to one idea, whether it is the Charlie Kirk thing or what he's doing in 2020, I would describe it as like outflanking the right to the right. Do you agree with that? And what does that actually look like in practice for Nick?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hostile takeover of the GOP. That's exactly what they call it, right? And I think it's been pretty successful, right? Even if it's not
doing the
Nick
episode
getting the
now,
glory. Yeah, I mean, that's completely what it is. I mean, stuff that used to get you banned off of really the internet is now just said on stage at CPAC, and that is, in part thanks to Nick and everyone else who participated in his destroy the GOP movement. Absolutely.
So December 2020, there's this French computer programmer, Laurent Bachelier. Is that right? Bachelier.
Bonus points for trying.
Thank you. And this is a weird case. So basically, this guy kills himself in the Hyatt Regency in Paris. And he suffers from a chronic nerve condition. And he overdoses on the medications that he's used to treat the pain for this nerve condition. And the day before he kills himself, he gives $500,000 in Bitcoin to VDARE, a white nationalist group that is recently folded. The Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi website that is recently been, I guess, they're basically hanging on. They've cut back almost everything. And also to Nick Fuentes. And Fuentes actually gets the overwhelming majority of this money. And it's a lot. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars go to Nick Fuentes. And it's really weird because, like I said, the guy gives his money. The only thing that holds these groups together necessarily is not just that they're all far right or that they're all, hover around white nationalism or whatever, a white nationalist message, or they're anti-immigrant. But they're all those things, but also pro-Trump, right? Because there are many white nationalist group, neo-Nazi group, these things that are anti-Trump or don't like mainstream politics. All these groups are pro-Trump. VDARE Daily Stormer, and Nick Fuentes. And this person gave this money, but is for some reason is a French person. I still don't understand exactly what happened there. But this money comes into play later. So in the run-up to January 6th, Nick makes some threatening comments about lawmakers. On January 4th, he says, Republicans just screwed us every day for 2 months straight, and we have no recourse. Why? Because we have no leverage. What are we going to do to them? What can you and I do to a state legislator besides kill them? We should not do that. I'm not advertising that, but I mean, what else can you do, right? So these are the kind of things that Nick is saying in the run-up to January 6th.
So at January 6th, Nick is there. He is at the Capitol. He does not go inside. Instead, he kind of stands on a little, I don't know what it is, like a podium statue kind of thing, and just gives a speech to his followers.
Keep moving towards the Capitol. It appears we are taking the Capitol back. Keep marching and don't relax. Never relax. Yeah. Break down the barriers and disregard the police. This Capitol belongs to us.
Before we keep moving, just another thing that makes Nick relevant to January 6th is during the Stop the Steal protests that were happening across the country, spearheaded by people like Ollie Alexander, who I mentioned earlier. Nick was like a frequent guest speaker at these events. Not always officially, but sometimes he would appear alongside people like Alex Jones. I mean, he was like, he was out there at these events, which is, I think, part of how he was able to attract a sizable amount of his fans to the Capitol that day. But let's keep moving. What happens after January 6th?
Nick's life becomes a living hell after January 6th. I think he would say that, and I would say that.
Couldn't happen to a worse guy.
Well, partly because of everybody understood the role he played in it. I just want to say, personally, I co-wrote 2 testimonies for the January 6th Commission that mention Nick specifically. One was about funding, and another one was specifically about the Groypers and who they were when they were at the Capitol, which they were, right? We saw the America First flags flying in events, all Stop the Steal events all through the country in the run-up to. I mean, it's really actually quite remarkable. You think about this guy who's 15 years old, he's talking in this thing and he's saying, well, Trump might be a little racist. And then flash forward a few years later, there are people waving these flags in the middle of an insurrection. It's kind of crazy.
Amanda, you were on the ground at some of these things. Could you tell us more about Nick's presence? What was his role in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, there were a bunch of America First flags at January 6th. I actually walked in, or stumbled upon, I guess, a bunch of them congregating at Freedom Plaza at one point before walking down to the Capitol. I was kind of behind them for a lot of the walk down. Just, they're everywhere. And then as they get arrested, of course, oh, that guy wasn't really a Groyper. Oh, barely knew him. Oh, he probably never even saw the show,
Of course not.
But they were there. They had his flags, they had his merch, and it was not the majority flag, but it was certainly noticeable to me.
Right. I mean, what were they doing? Were they just kind of milling about, or was there anything notable about their presence there?
I mean, they were chanting Christ is King. That, I think, was the most notable. When I found them at Freedom Plaza and then walked down, so it's almost a mile walk.
Just I think to clarify for the listeners that is a regular chant that Groypers use, right?
Yes. Unfortunately, it is. It's also a crypto coin now, as I learned at the Bitcoin conference last week. But yeah, I don't think it's Nick affiliated though.
Christ is king. He's king, not the Bitcoin. Ignore the Bitcoin we're using here, right?
I'm just imagining talking to your parents and what are you doing for retirement? It's well, I've got some fart coin and I've got some Christ is King coin, and yeah, I don't know, man. I think I should be set here. Diamond hands. Something happens to Nick's crypto. Mike, you were talking about that $500,000. Yeah. Or not $500,000 that he gets, but the bulk share of the $500,000
Let's talk
he
about
gets from
why
this French guy.
Yeah, let's talk about why this January 6th situation becomes a living hell for Nick. So DLive actually deplatforms him, and that was a big one because DLive looked like they were going to be a say anything platform that just would not give a shit like what he said or what he did. And the fact that they got rid of him and Baked Alaska, you know, I don't know whether the government exerted pressure on DLive, but they did. I mean, they wouldn't when I was reporting on DLive, they would not respond to requests for comment, and then all of a sudden they just turn around and like axe these two guys affiliated with America First. The government seizes his assets, he tells people, in April of 2021. That doesn't sound nice. And his crypto is also subject to seizure. And that's the crypto. That's where we mentioned that Laurent Bachelier. Yeah, that's where it came from. And as we said, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that was just taken from Nick, like boom, like that.
He also claims that he's placed on the no-fly list.
Yes, that's right.
I don't know.
I mean,
I had reasons to kind of doubt that. I'm not saying he's lying, but I'm just saying, you know, Michelle Malkin made a big stink about like filing a FOIA request to try to get details and confirmation about it. And I don't think anything ever came of that. But, you know, at least for a period, he reported having trouble boarding flights.
Yeah. And the other thing that happens here, because he's getting so much attention from the feds, people label him a snitch, you know, a kind of a Fed and or saying he glows or whatever, which is a slang for like he's a CIA or something, right? Because he's so embedded in that world, it is very discrediting, and he keeps having to overcome these accusations that he's a Fed. So he somehow this is what Nick finds a way. I gotta say, like I don't know how he does this, but he somehow puts up AFPAC 2 at this point, and this actually features both a sitting member of Congress and a former one in Paul Gosar, who speaks, and so does Steve King, the former congressman from Iowa, who was sort of pushed out for, you know, his ties to the white supremacist movement, which is funny because if the timing were different, I don't think he would ever have been pushed out.
It would never happen today.
Yeah, in the post January 6th no apology era, I think Steve King stays easily because I mean Gosar is worse and Marjorie Taylor Greene is arguably worse, but whatever. I'm not crying for Steve King. Anyway, so both these guys speak at APAC 2. And behind the scenes, Nick is collaborating with a Jewish man named Joseph Victor Nathan German. And his Jewishness is only relevant because Nick is one of the arguably the most high-profile anti-Semite in the country, who spends almost all his time like talking about Jews as if they're like monsters from another planet, like that are coming to hurt people. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But he collaborates with this Joseph German fellow. The federal government accuses German of running a crypto solicitation scheme, and his investors in some whatever crypto thing he has going lose their proverbial shirts. A lot of people lost money investing with this guy, but he's the guy who helps form AFPAC, the nonprofit, and he also labels himself Assistant Groyper. That's the name he goes by, and he also calls himself the America First Jew. I don't know. I don't get it, but I would think of it as a Jewish person. I would not want to associate with Nick Fuentes. Amanda, do you have something? Yeah,
I was just going to say, between the crypto donation, the crypto scammer assistant Groyper, if you wanted to go to AFPAC in 2021, while all these rumors are circulating about Nick being a Fed, you either had to give Nick your bank account information, your real name, okay, and your routing and checking number, or mail him $100 cash in an envelope, which is why I did not go to AFPAC. But
That's
you would
right.
think,
I seem to recall that, actually. Thank you for bringing that up. That's very important.
Yeah, you would think that they could take crypto.
Yeah,
since
and
they're obviously so well versed.
And meanwhile, people are like, credibly accusing him of, of speaking to the feds. We don't know everything he said or whatever he did behind closed doors.
And that was not a scarcely attended event either. That was a packed room. Yeah.
I couldn't get in. By the time I changed my mind, it was too late. Couldn't buy a ticket.
So around this time, Mike, you actually created a little bit of trouble for Nick. You published an article on Twitter's role, it was still Twitter then, in promoting January 6th. And they suspended Nick, which that was kind of, I mean, he's back now that it's X, but like at that point, he is gone off the mainstream internet. He is banned from God knows how many platforms, and he has to use things like Telegram. He starts building his own live streaming site, post-DLive, called Cozy TV, which I think is still up today.
Yeah, it still runs.
Yeah, so, there's a host of figures on there. So he has, again, deepened his sort of independence from the mainstream. And despite being sequestered in these weird parts of the internet, continues to grow his profile.
Yeah. And then around that time, he does his comeback, which is these Vax Watch events. I don't, Amanda, did you go to any of these?
I did not.
Okay.
This sounds like boomer shit.
Apologies
to any
was.
Boomer listeners.
So
but
I went to go see Nick speak on a street corner, like a street preacher, in front of about maybe 40 Groypers, and rail about COVID. It was just like, it was so beat. Like, it's just like, it just didn't feel like it was hitting, it didn't even seem like it's hitting them. It's like, you can't be too worked up over this COVID stuff, in my opinion, especially by that time, which is late into 2021. Anyway, during that time, he called me out and yelled at me from the crowd. There's a clip of that.
That man on that cross, that is our ultimate reality. That is more real than your job. That is more real than your friends. That is more real than these barricades, than that scumbag journalist over there. That is more real than that.
Unfortunately, we have to revisit that topic from earlier.
Yes.
The rumors that Nick Fuentes is gay come back. Mike, what's happening?
Yeah, so this is a really trashy corner of the internet, people. It involves Andy Worski. Jared, who is Andy Worski? Because
he was like a Jesus, man. I wonder what he's doing now.
Probably he's still hosting Kino Casino.
That's still?
Yes. I checked him before this. So basically, there's a guy named Andy Worski who hosts a live stream talk show, sort of. He kind of came up as like an anti-SJW YouTuber, kind of in that era, and eventually kind of got in with guys like, we don't have time to dive into all these guys, but guys like Ethan Ralph and whatever. There was a pretty popular sort of far-right debate show that he was kind of co-hosting at the time. It was called Internet Blood Sports. That might bring back traumatic memories for some people. I know it does for me. And then he kind of just like crashes and burns. There's allegations that he's like a cokehead, and I guess his like romantic relationships fall apart. He gets into it with Ian Miles Chong at some point, but that's who he is in short. Andy and his sidekick on this YouTube show called Kino Casino, who is a Canadian guy, kind of a heavyset guy named PPP. They start to cover the fallout of people leaving Nick's movement week after week for a while, just as sort of an internet gossip phenomenon. And Jaden McNeil goes on Kino Casino, and he says that Nick forbids him from having a girlfriend and boasts that he searches his furniture with a black light looking for semen.
Whatever. I'm like, okay, fair enough. May 1st, I'll be out. I wanted to get out as soon as possible anyways to get the fuck away from him. But I left my couch and I left my bed just because I can't haul that in my car. And it's like an 8-hour drive. So, and I didn't want to rent a U-Haul, but he's telling all of his buddies that he got a black light because he wanted to go see if there was any cum on my couch. He's like, that was some sort of own.
No. Okay, hold on. He's cum hunting.
Yes,
He was licking the spots. Well,
I don't know about that. But
no, come on.
McNeil says, quote, Nick doesn't want a political movement, but wants a hardcore cult of followers instead. He calls America First and the Groyper movement a homosexual death cult. And Nick is doing these kind of like pledges with the audience that are say things like, I swear my undying allegiance to Nicholas J. Fuentes and the America First movement, so help me God. So help me God, raise your hand and hold it high. I swear I will defend the white race and my Savior Jesus Christ, my loyalty to the America First movement, Nicholas J. Fuentes, so help me God. So, bottom text, that's what I got there. Around this time, they're also pushing White Boy Summer. Amanda, do you remember anything about that?
Oh my God, I just remember them going into the Mall of America and acting like a bunch of assholes on Telegram. Well, I had COVID. I couldn't even go anywhere. Very sad.
Yeah, it was just like, a bunch of, they share a bunch of playlists supporting mostly white artists, which is funny because Nick listens to almost all rap from black artists. Baked Alaska is like kind of still very much in his orbit around this time in 2021. Nick gets questioned by the January 6th committee in early 2022. And again, this is peak accusations around him being a Fed. He pleads the fifth basically a million times in the transcript. Then we have AFPAC 3 comes along, and this one features Marjorie Taylor Greene,
who at that time is like, despite being rightfully characterized as a crank, by this point has turned into one of their top fundraisers and most coveted endorsements. So Marjorie Taylor Greene showing up is something, right? I mean, it's one of the conservative movement's biggest figures at that time, and I would argue even still today.
Yeah, I mean, she is a huge star, and I personally don't understand how we could wind up in this timeline with where someone like her has that kind of celebrity, but that's where it is. And then it takes her 9 months, but she eventually disavows Fuentes because the pressure around that becomes bigger and bigger. Nick's comments about particularly Jews become harder and harder to defend. I'm sure she could skirt by on some of the racist stuff.
Most people in this country has no clue who Nick Fuentes is. And if they heard his statements that he makes, they would want nothing to do with him. He sounds like a very immature young man saying hateful things about people and using a people group, talking about people he doesn't like by an entire people group, which is horrible. Why would he ever do that? And then also saying, oh, I'm not racist or I'm not these things. Yeah, you are if you talk that way, because that's how you sound.
Nick also starts pushing a very pro-Russia line, a very pro-Putin line as the war starts to develop. And that becomes a reoccurring thing. The pro-Putin thing becomes a recurring thing for Nick over time.
Winston Churchill, Zelensky's a hero. Oh, the fierce resistance of the Ukrainian people. You're going to hell. You're going to burn in hell forever for what you've done. I think that Zelensky should be executed for war crimes. I think he should be executed for what he's done.
You might be saying, like, how did anybody even know what Nick was doing at this point? Because we're not in the Elon Musk X era quite yet. We're not quite in the era where he gets resurrected on mainstream social media. So how the hell does anybody other than the Groypers even know what Nick is doing or what's going on? And the answer is most people really at this point are finding out from journalists and progressive activists who are archiving his clips.
One of the places that's done a lot of that, and a lot of the clips you've heard on this show so far have actually come from here, is a place I used to write for called Right Wing Watch. They post clips on Twitter, Blue Sky, whatever, like that sort of showcase these personalities saying some of their craziest shit and exposes it to a wider audience. This has also been the bread and butter for organizations like Media Matters. A lot of sort of progressive angled journalism has been all about this sort of almost old school journalism philosophy of shining the light, putting sunlight on the darkness. So that's how a lot of people end up coming across and getting exposed to clips of Nick saying things like women should be burned alive, or that husbands should beat their wives, or that we need Catholic Taliban rule, or that Christian laws need to get put on everybody. All these rants about Jewish people, the quote unquote real Holocaust being when Christ was crucified, that we need to send the military into black neighborhoods, and so on and so on. I mean, there's an endless amount of these crazy comments from Nick because he podcasts nearly every night since he was 15 years old, right? But I remember even at Right Wing Watch when I was there before I departed, like sometimes these clips like Groypers would show up and be like, thank you so much for sharing, getting the word out and sharing the message. And I thought this would just kind of be like an interesting thing to talk about. I mean, we're doing a light version of that even by recording this episode, right? And that's always been kind of a meta debate about what people call amplification or whatever, about when does applying that scrutiny, directing that focus towards a figure, have a secondary service that's like beneficial to them. And I feel like that's a question that like doesn't always have as clear of an answer as people would like it to. I also, went to school for journalism and have that old school journalist brain of like, this is a net positive. Maybe it did help his profile, but like at the end of the day, we now have this record of like things that Nick has said that he could be held accountable for, or people would be made to respond to. But I'm curious how both of you have kind of grappled with that question of like, when does applying that kind of focus on somebody like Nick at moments or around, certain statements and stuff kind of end up serving a detriment? I mean, it's kind of an existential question for any sort of coverage of anything, I guess. But Amanda, how have you reconciled with that? I mean, I've certainly seen people accuse you of all kinds of like crazy shit, from being in cahoots with the Groypers to give them press coverage to being one yourself or whatever. Like how have you kind of squared that dynamic in your own work?
I'll say out of the gate, like the Right Wing Watch stuff, sometimes I think it's really bad. I mean, there's clips that they post that I just wish they would not post. On the other hand, when Nick went to Texas and met with the GOP there, it was immensely helpful because it was already pre-done. And like, I have so much of his stuff on a hard drive and I run a lot of it through Otter. So I can just go back and search keywords, and it's how I've doxed people in the past. But, like if you've got like someone who's like the head of a county GOP and is like, quick, give me like 5 clips of Nick Fuentes saying stuff, that I can show people who are going to vote like in my county. It's actually very helpful to have these like pre-cut links that I could just be like, here you go. And I don't have to sit around and do it myself. And I don't have time, to go through 100 years of Nick Fuentes hours because he can live stream for 10 hours straight. But then other times it is stuff where it's like stuff that's like clearly a joke, or like whatever. And like it's stripped of its context and it's stripped of understanding of the audience that it's for. And that is the kind of stuff where it's like, do we have to do this? Because it makes, I don't know. Everything I do, all of my journalism, I have never once written for the left. I have only ever written for Republicans. I write something and I think, if I voted for Mitt Romney, how would I feel about this? And that's how I determine what I say and what I don't say, and like what I think should be amplified and what I think should not be amplified. And I don't expect Right Wing Watch to take that, stance. I think it's, probably not for most people, but as a result, there's like a lot of stuff that I'm just very dismissive of, especially things that are clearly jokes, even if they're off color. I don't really want to deal with it because I think it kind of cheapens the harder stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think it does make sense. What I was going to say here is that we can't change what has already happened. We can only look at how we cover Nick going forward. So I'll just say fact that Right Wing Watch played a big role in keeping him in the public eye with his horrific comments and stuff like that would go viral. That has already happened. And it led to the next point, which is going to be, and bringing us to the last section of this story, which involves Ye or Kanye West. And I don't think there's any way that Nick would have had that kind of stature to be sort of picked by Ye if it weren't for the hatred and revulsion that liberals and leftists felt towards Nick Fuentes. Like that is what I think attracted Ye. I think that's what made him interesting, right? He saw that the Nick had the capacity to shock. Ye himself wants to shock. He wants to horrify. He wants to make people squeamish. He saw in Nick that, and I don't think without this stuff, without our Twitter reactions and stuff to Nick, he would have been in a position to be amplified by one of the biggest entertainers of the last 25 years. So on that note, Trump dines with Nick in 2022, and by his side is Ye, or Kanye West, if you prefer, his original name. And Nick is the side character here. Ye is apparently the main attraction, but Trump praises Nick. And this connection between the two men is organized by a man named Milo Yiannopoulos, a name that we would all like to forget, but yet he persists. He's still around, folks. He's still somehow.
Well, he's Ye's manager now. I mean, on the episode where we talked about Ye, we got into it a little bit, but like the skinny is disgraced Breitbart blogger, once the sort of champion of offensive conservative campus speaking circuits.
Like Wintrich, also openly gay, of course.
Just like Ali Alexander, his apparent affinity for young men did him in. So
yes,
you just Google that one.
Yes,
guys. I don't want to get into it.
So there's here's a clip of talking about how they met.
I've been pulling together a campaign, and after I put up the DEF CON tweet, a bunch of people that have been canceled, like Alex Jones, I started getting in contact with other people that were now on the inside of the matrix, and Alex Jones, producer, said that Milo wanted to contact me, and here we are.
So that's how you guys got in contact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, originally, and then I suggested that we bring in Nicholas as a enormous extra brain firepower that he is. Most extraordinarily brilliant political commentator of his generation, and he's been treated just about as badly as anybody. So I thought he deserved to be in the room too. And yeah, that's pretty much how we got together.
And then a thing that probably most of you have seen before, which is Nick appears with Ye wearing a mask. Oh, it's kind of a mask with eye slits that you can't really see.
Yeah, I don't know. He's worn it in public a couple times since then, but yeah, just like
he had worn it before too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's some head covering mask, and with Alex Jones, who just, oh, do you say Hitler? What? He seems to be taken aback by how openly fascist these guys are. He prefers the more like Diet Coke version of fascism.
And unfortunately, a very funny moment from that appearance on Alex Jones is Ye brings along a butterfly net and uses it to pantomime Benjamin Netanyahu. He's like, it's Nettie, he's trying
to. My God.
His and he, Netanyahu, who is just, who he pantomimes is just like getting on his case about saying mean things about Jewish people. It's just like, hey, don't say that. It's just it is incredibly stupid and offensive, but I'm sorry, but I laughed.
Yeah, it's one of the things when when you've been covering this stuff for long enough, your brain is like basically sawdust in there. Like it will elicit a chuckle just because things are just too dark up there.
Someone brought a net and a Yoo-hoo to FPAC. They sit in line with it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Anyway, so now we're almost up to like the Amanda show, basically. This to me is, that's where we're kind of at. I mean, the rest of the stuff with Nick that we're going to cover here, I'll just briefly mention some things. There was what was the gay porn thing? Sorry, I just want to make sure it was gay porn.
So he's like live streaming at the end of.
Oh yeah, that's right. Why don't you just say that, please?
Once again, Nick's sexuality comes into question. He's live streaming one night. At the end of his show, the screen flips and it's just filled with like hardcore gay pornography. Nick blames Israel. Who wouldn't, I guess? But
it would be funny if it was actually Israel.
Complete just brain rot shit. But like I've seen the clip. I hate to say it. I don't think Nick did that. I think something was like off about that. I don't know. It was as simple as like he opened the wrong tab. Also, why for that to be true, we'd have to like believe that Nick is like taking his super chats while like he's talking to the camera, and every time he looks down, he's just like getting an eyeful of hardcore gay pornography, which is a very funny mental image, but one that I find a little bit implausible.
Well, I mean, Mossad's intelligence may be off here because Nick could actually have hardcore gay sex on his live stream, and the Groypers would act like it didn't happen. That is what I've learned from following him for a while. I don't know what you think, Amanda.
Yeah, 100%.
So yeah, so he's at this point now. We're in the shit now as a culture. Trump 2 is coming like a bat out of hell. We're all in denial that Kamala has a shot. Musk is kind of going back and forth. He kind of lets Nick on at one point and then brings him off and then lets him on and lets him off. And then he eventually just lets him back on in May of 2024. So he's got his Twitter account back, baby. He's got a way to reach people. He's got a way to kind of promote his brand. And guess what? He does numbers all the time, just like he used to. He's still one of the great antagonists of that site, like all time, probably in terms of trolling, harassing, or not even harassing people, but just singling out people for his fans to go after. He is, it was like, it's like, it was like letting, and then Ghostbusters when they pull the switch and like everybody comes out, like all the ghosts come back out. Like that was what they came back on. But when Nick, they held off from him and it was like the ultimate. He was the ultimate. He's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man of that site.
At this time, Nick, thanks to his visibility on Twitter again, is getting into mainstream discourse, right? He is pro-Trump in 2024. Then he becomes, at least ostensibly, anti-Trump. He's accused of being a Kamala supporter, right? I mean, in the MAGA movement, anything other than undying loyalty, it's like, you might as well be Antifa or whatever. But the reason he does this is he feels that the Trump campaign is getting a little squishy. It's getting a little soft. He's not going as hard on the immigration stuff. He's not going as hard on all sorts of things. And I mean, I don't know how you could watch those rallies and get that impression, but that's
seeing grandmas holding signs that say mass deportations now. Like, yeah, how about that? There's also the idea that he's beholden to Israel, which there may be some truth to that, but coming from Nick Fuentes, we also know that it's not anything but his anti-Semitism.
So he tries to repeat the Groyper War idea that he launched against Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. Essentially, same idea. Pressure. This time, the Trump campaign to adopt these harder ideological and rhetorical lines. It's a massive flop comparatively. He's talking a big game about like, we're gonna pressure them, we're gonna do this, but like putting pressure on Charlie Kirk while he's like stuck on a stage at a university is a much different beast than trying to influence a presidential campaign that has, hundreds of millions of dollars and all kinds of political force behind it. They try to claim credit for Corey Lewandowski, Trump's former campaign guy, coming back into the mix. They're trying to get Trump to fire his current campaign managers. That doesn't happen. He says they're going to go door knock in Michigan and try to turn conservatives against Trump. That like basically they're going to play hardball and be like, we'll stop if you give us what we want. It doesn't work. It doesn't sustain. There's like a couple big days on X and social media where they're just spamming posts, but it doesn't sustain. It really just fizzles out and becomes an afterthought. And that, I think, takes us up to the point where, Amanda, we're going to need your help to fill in the rest of this, right? First off, thoughts on Groyper War 2. Where were you when the first shots were fired?
I was in the kitchen watching it on a live stream, and I was like, let's go. I'm going to book my flight to Michigan right now. Just tell me the day. I'm so excited to be there and to be part of this. And unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to watch them knock on doors. So I will say, I have heard that they annoyed the shit out of Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles with those emails. Like, it actually at least was annoying for a couple of days.
And who are they for the listeners so they know who they are?
Trump's campaign co-managers.
I mean, it didn't force their resignation. That's clear. They're still part of Trump land today. But before that, too, I remember in Detroit, right? Like Nick has just not had a very good time in Michigan, right? Talk to me.
No.
There was before the Groyper War too. So spinning the clock back just a little bit, what was Nick doing in Michigan? And is this where you saw Paul Ingracia?
Oh yeah, this is where I saw Paul.
Okay, tell us about Detroit. When is this? What's going on? And how does a Trump administration official get there?
It is almost a year to the day because I flew to Michigan on my birthday for this mess. Turning Point USA had the People's Conference. They're not usually annual conference. I don't know. It's like a random conference. They had it. It was in Michigan. It was in Detroit. Everyone was pissed. People were like, I don't want to go to Detroit. The Groypers were like, it's full of Black people. And Nick was like, we're going to do it. We're going to have AFPAC. It's going to be in Detroit. So all these Groypers show up to Detroit. The venue that Nick had scheduled was under the impression they were not a political event. And when they realized what was going on, they canceled them. But Nick did not pass this information on to anybody, actually. He just said, I'll tell you guys where to meet up soon, and unfortunately, there wasn't anywhere to meet up. So you just had crowds of like little gangs of 20-year-old white guys in these America First hats and suits, wandering around Detroit, asking literally anybody that looked like them, do you know where the Fuentes event is? I was with some people who live in the area who kind of look like Groypers, and people were asking them, do you guys know? And they were like, fuck Nick Fuentes? What? No. There was supposed to be, that huge event. There was supposed to be a fancy VIP dinner. And unfortunately, everything got canceled.
And how much were tickets? I remember there being some sort of controversy because this was not necessarily a cheap event. And I don't know if did anybody get their money back? Do you know?
Oh, no. They did not. And actually, if you ask for your money back, you're probably a Jew. And if you're not a Jew, you're probably a Fed. So why don't you just be grateful that you donated to the cause?
But the guy who helped create their nonprofit is Jewish.
Yeah, well,
and
if you ask for the money
investigation
back
from the feds.
Exactly. See, he was scamming people. Listen. They get so mad if you talk about getting your money back. They so mad. It's so funny. So then everybody is just kind of like, what do we do? So I'm like, great. My work is done. I don't have fuck all else to do. I can go eat dinner. And as soon as I get my food, these idiots start congregating in front of the convention center. So I have my food in a to-go bag, some $70 steak or something from the casino, because I was I'm done, checked out. And I'm lugging around the steak, and I walk on down to the convention center. And
this makes the story so much better that you have a fancy steak. How is the steak? How is the steak cooked? Tell us that, Amanda.
It was medium rare.
So we've got a medium rare fillet in a bag.
Yeah. In a bag. And I go down to the convention center, and this cop stops me. He's like, are you part of this? And I'm like, well, I'm a journalist. He's like, do you have anything to indicate that? And I was like, I have my fucking half-eaten dinner. I thought I was off. I thought we were done. He's like, we did too. Go on. So the cops are also not super thrilled about this. So I walk up, and it's I wouldn't say bottom tier influencers, but high, Groyper generals is what they would call themselves.
Like military general.
Yes. Well, they have wars. Okay, first of all, many of them fought in at least one Groyper war. So they're also veterans. So they are sitting up on a little ledge, giving incorrect information about Catholicism and just kind of ranting. But it's outside, and it's windy. And we're on the water, kind of. The convention center is pretty close to the water. It's windy. And you just see their little mouths moving. And then most of what they say gets lost in the wind. So that's pretty sad. And it's during this time where I'm sitting there watching that Paul Ingracia, for some reason, despite definitely knowing who I am, because I've written about his friends many times and do them undercover as well, just stops walking right in front of me to watch these speeches and just stands there. I have no idea why he chose that spot. So everybody is getting all jazzed. You're like, oh my God, these Groyper generals are so cool. I wish I could be like them. They're so famous. They have 2,500 followers on Twitter. This is crazy. And then they start chanting, Groyper, and Nick. And eventually Nick does show up.
What's the vibe? What's the vibe when the man arrives?
Oh my God. It's the most exciting moment of anybody's lives. I
saw him at the Vax Watch event, and it was his discomfort when he saw me was palpable. But he was not surrounded by his biggest crowd, right? They were not like he didn't have it. He didn't look very cool. I mean, he must have had a much bigger crowd there.
It was huge. Yeah, it really was a ton of people. And I actually was concerned about it. I kind of tried to stay a little bit out of his line of sight because I was like, I don't want him to point at me and indicate that I'm there.
Which he might do. He did that to me.
Yeah.
He gets really fixated on journalists.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm not like there's like I don't know, 1 billion 22-year-old boys here. I don't want this. So I kind of stood to the side, but he went up on the roof. He's got his megaphone. He's yelling, Henry Ford, we canceled him. That's very sad, and other various things.
I'll remember that next time I'm driving down the road and I see 5,000 Ford cars.
Totally canceled. It's actually illegal to have a Ford. They shoot you if you buy one, I hear, especially in Detroit. He was one of our great Americans, Nick said. And I remember at one point, someone on the roof yelled out, I freaking love Hitler. Just all anti-Semitic shit, all racist shit. Everybody's eating it up, and Trump had been speaking at Turning Point, so people are leaving Turning Point, and they're kind of walking directly into it, which I think is why Paul Ingrassia tried to say, "Oh, I just stumbled upon it when I left Turning Point," but that's not true. Because people were walking by, people would be like, "Who is that?" And the Groypers would they were on. They were like, "Oh, that's Nick Fuentes. Oh no, he's not as bad as you think. He just has questions about Israel and our relationship with Israel." And really trying to play it down and saying it was just about free speech. And I was watching it work. It was working pretty successfully on boomers who were wandering by. And so up there, he gets down. Also, he just took over the roof. He was not given permission to be up there. And some of the Groyper generals, hardened by war, stood at the bottom of the steps to go up to the roof. And when security came by and was like, "You guys got to get down," they were like, "You could try to make us, but there's more of us in our review." So they won that battle as well. And that was supposed to satiate people's desire to see Nick, even though they paid a ton of money and traveled to a city they didn't want to be in. Later that evening, once again, I get back to my hotel and I'm like, I can finally eat this fucking steak. And then my phone starts blowing up. Nick's hosting another event. I'm like, what the fuck? How? How is this possible?
I'm a pescatarian and I don't eat steak, but I in a past life I did. And I'm just wondering about the quality of this offering after 2 rounds of Fuentes delays.
Yeah, there's been a lot of effort to figure out, how to optimize steak at different temperatures, but nobody has ever just spent hours saying viciously anti-Semitic things to a steak and really recorded how that affects flavor, texture, that sort of thing.
In retrospect, I should have just pulled it out of the bag and started to eat it with my hands at the event. I think that would have been better.
I just love the idea. Of you just eating a steak with your bare hands at this. I mean, because it perfectly encapsulates how everybody kind of feels right now in this country. It's just sort of we're all at some Nick Fuentes event eating our dinner with our hands
while listening to the sweet nothings of Henry Ford's cancellation.
So spinning us to the end, a few more sort of things of note. Nick Fuentes has continued to be kind of in and out close to Ye, including surrounding the release of the Heil Hitler song, which we talked about on that episode a few weeks ago. But after the election, Nick also got into a bit of hot water. Once Trump won, he tweeted, Your Body, My Choice, and it just became like, you know those lamps you can put outside, those like bright lamps that attract mosquitoes and they fly in and they kill it. It was like that for liberals.
Yeah, that's why I said he's maybe the best antagonist in the history of that site. He's one of the best.
I mean, people got fucking mad, right? And they started. People knew where Nick lived. This was not like new information, but his address in Berwyn, Illinois, starts circulating again. Berwyn's another suburb down in the Southwest, and people are showing up to his house, taking pictures, whatever. One woman goes up to the door, is thinking about ringing the doorbell. According to her, is not sure she wants to. Somebody's egging her on, and then like if you're watching a David Attenborough documentary, it's like the little like weasel pops out of the hole to like grab the mouse or whatever. Nick does this, but with pepper spray. Takes her phone and hits her in the face with some pepper spray, and gets a criminal charge for it. Amanda, please tell us more about that.
Well, everything is like still pending with it, right? I went to some of the court.
Yeah, I don't know the latest. Like as we're recording, I know he had to show up and get arraigned, right?
Yeah.
Pleaded not guilty.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a misdemeanor, right? It's even if he's convicted, it's not like Nick's going to jail for a long time or anything.
Yeah.
It's a first-time offender with whatever. I mean,
that's what I went to. I went to that initial hearing in Chicago. And I mean, he was virtual. His lawyer was virtual. And it's very difficult. You basically have to have a lawyer look up for you because the public cannot access it and the information about the court dates. So I do plan to go back. But as far as I know, it's still ongoing because I think he had a hearing like 2 or 3 weeks ago that I couldn't make. I'm pretty sure. But we'll see. I mean, it was a dumb thing to do. You can't open your door and do that. Like, I don't know what he expected.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect he's going to face too much consequences for it, given the circumstances, but like a whole set of headaches. And then there was some like crazy case where this younger guy, like, I hope I'm remembering this correctly, like killed his parents or something, neighbors, somewhat in his vicinity, flees and winds up at Nick's house with a crossbow or something like that. Something fucking nuts, right? The police ultimately come and grab him and nothing happens to Nick, but like Nick says, I'm moving, fuck it, I'm done. Somebody came to kill me. I still don't know anything about this kid that like went on this murder rampage and then for one reason or another was like, I'm going to go to Nick's house. Was he thinking Nick would take him in? Did he want to hurt Nick? I don't know. Somebody who, just killed a couple of people is not exactly in their right mind. So who knows? Does it matter? I don't know. But that's a thing too.
that happened the night before he had court too. Like that was in the very court. So I think if anything helps bolster, his self-defense. Look how many crazy people are just showing up at my house all the time.
You see his fans using his mugshot from his battery charge as like their avatar now too, as well. So it's very similar to the Donald Trump. As he is in many ways very much like Trump. Like he's like a little Trump that calls himself an incel. Yeah, I mean.
Now, Amanda, I just want to get your take before we wrap up here. We spent the last couple hours going through Nick's biography, and there's several points along the way. And this was true in the Candace episode. It's true in the Tim Pool episode. It's true of the Jack Posobiec episode. Go listen to all of those if you haven't already. There's many points along the way that should have been career suicide for Nick. I mean, like, if you wanted, if your parents pressured you into becoming a conservative personality and you just wanted to fuck it up as bad as possible to get out of it, like your parents force you into sports and you just like don't practice and just like shit the bed and get kicked off the team or whatever. Like this is the equivalent of that for conservative commentary, yet his profile has risen to the point where Nick is now, hinting that, beyond Paul and Gracia, that there are Groypers in the Trump administration, right? His profile just continues to rise. He seems to kind of make it out the other side of everything. And Amanda, my question to you is why? Do you have any theories?
If you're a Republican in this country and you're under the age of 35, maybe 40 at this point, and active, you like not passively vote, but if you are active in the Young Republican Club, if you are active, especially like in a position of leadership, if you are a leader in your Young Republican Club, if you are, state chair or county chair or like whatever, if you are trying to work in politics, you know who Nick Fuentes is because he has shaped your entire generation. He has shaped the way conservatism is for people who are his age and younger. And so you are spending all of your time either trying to emulate him or you're spending all of your time trying to weed out people who like him. And obviously that's the losing side. That's the bulwark side, right? And so, I mean, it is impossible, I think, in many ways to hire someone who is 23, 24, 27 years old, who is not influenced by Nick Fuentes in the Republican Party. I mean, Nick is not lying. He does have other people in the administration. I mean, he went to meet with one of the biggest, PACs in all of Texas GOP, funded by the biggest billionaire donor, and nothing came of it. Nothing negative came of it. I made some low-level people lose their jobs when I wrote about their connections to Nick. But his people have taken over completely the Young Republican clubs. They are Nick Fuentes clubs. And that is the hiring base. The YRs is the hiring base for the GOP. And so, I mean, it's like Alex Jones. A lot of people say, oh, I love Alex Jones. That doesn't mean they watch every episode or they really know what his inconsistency is, but they know the clips, they know the vibe, they get it. It's like that. But if Alex Jones was like way more accessible, because Nick is extremely accessible to people in politics.
I think that's a good place to wrap it up. We will end this episode the same way we've done the prior ones. Mike, I'll start with you. After everything we've reviewed, the clips we've played, the information from Amanda, the timeline we've gone over, who the hell is Nick Fuentes?
I think he's a sociopath. Nick has joked about being sociopathic himself. I don't know if it's a joke or it's real. But I think you should listen to himself if he is. I think he's, in many ways, he has all the trimmings of like a very successful politician, right? And they tend to be very sociopathic as well. Nick is able to live a life full with contradictions. I don't know what his sexuality is or what his sexuality is to him. Does not matter. But there's been enough weird things around it and relative to the extreme homophobia of his fans that it's strange. The fact that he's a quarter Mexican and like the Mexican immigrants are the first people sort of targeted by Trump's rhetoric, and he's able to survive it. I mean, these are only a sociopath can survive these sort of things and also can command an audience the way Nick is able to do. He survives trouble and he's able to command an audience, and he's able to do it under circumstances that other white supremacist figures, fascist figures, white anti-immigrant figures, people all in this world, they're not able to do it. They're not able to do what Nick does. He was pushed literally onto his own live stream platform and survived with no major social media thing. So in that sense, do I think, could I imagine a scenario in which Nick is running for office later in his life? Yes, I think so. I think he probably fantasizes about it. As Amanda said, like he has that kind of power in the conservative movement. And in covering him, I think of all the people we've covered, he has the highest ceiling of success potential and the lowest floor of any of them, in the sense that if it doesn't end well for Nick, it's going to be really bad based upon how close to a cult his fan base really seems.
Yeah, where will they go? Amanda, who the hell is Nick Fuentes?
An asshole, I think.
That's fair.
Asshole, kind of a cult leader, He's got so many people that are willing to rape, kill, and die for him. And it's just, I mean, people are even willing to risk their jobs, to bring in his rhetoric, to feel out other people. I mean, testing the waters to see, get a job, you're in someone's office and seeing who else might be a Groyper who's there. I mean, and that's shit that if it goes wrong, they get you fired. And these are like, staff jobs, and they're not, not like well paid, but they are the stepping stone to be into politics. And getting blacklisted, in theory, could be bad, and they'll do it anyway. I mean, he's a very gifted live streamer, and he's also, I mean, the first time I ever thought he would be a problem, there's like a video of him, I think it's in Iowa or something. He went to go talk, and then a bunch of students were like, "Hey, asshole," and they kind of cornered him, and he just jumps up on this ledge and is just riffing with them. They're asking questions, and he's like, "I'm not a white nationalist," and he's going back and forth with them. And he's very young. I mean, he's 20 in the video, and it's something that 99.9% of people would not be able to do poorly, and he does it well. So, I think he's a problem.
So yeah, Jared, you've heard what we have to say. Who the hell is Nick Fuentes?
I'm going to take a little bit of a different track, and hear me out here. It'll make sense by the time I finish. Nick Fuentes is the conservative movement's forbidden fruit. And what I mean by that is, as you've noted, Amanda, and as we've outlined throughout this episode, Nick has had a, however you feel about it, and to be clear, we don't like it, profound influence on younger conservatives, particularly those that are now coming to the age where a staffing job or a administration job or a role at a major nonprofit or whatever is on the table for them, right? He has helped shape that contingency of the conservative movement. If you are in conservative politics, like you said, again, Amanda, you know who this guy is, and you either love him or you hate him. But if you love him, you have to be careful who you say that to, because if it gets out, it could be detrimental to your own career. The conservative movement, through all the time that I've covered Nick, right, which was kind of starting back in 2017, but pre-Charlottesville, occasionally would kind of find his way into the work I was doing. The conservative movement wants Nick to be a good boy so bad. He's a good speaker. He's occasionally funny. He's hip to live streaming. He has a young, excited audience. They would kill. They would move heaven and earth to get that in their camp. But Nick just can't behave. He's too radical. He's too hateful. And his audience expects that of him now. If he just swallowed the pill and became every other Turning Point USA, pundit talking about taxes and the loony left, or if he adopted their parlance and their talking points, his audience would vomit. So he's kind of stuck. He has to be Nick Fuentes that he is today forever, I guess, barring some total collapse of his career. But so he is what so many people in the conservative movement wish could be theirs. Right? He is, maybe forbidden fruit is the wrong thing, but he's an object of desire for the conservative movement. They want him. They want somebody like him so bad. And just all of politics is like this too. I mean, the Democrats, that New York Times report, I guess they're going to spend $20 million trying to see if they could figure this kind of shit out for themselves, right? They want it so bad, but they just can't have it. But as we're seeing, I mean, especially in Trump too, those consequences for associating with him, for being a fan of him, could be fading. And I guess we'll just have to see if Nick continues to inch closer to power, in this unbrave new world that we're all in. So that's who I think Nick Fuentes is. He'll probably clip that. He's going to love that. But I don't like it, but that's how I feel.
It is what it is. I don't think we we helped him on this episode, actually.
Nick,
No.
say my name. Just say my name on your show if you clip this. You have to say who I am.
Nick, if you need a new Groyper general, we can, especially with all this cool new AI stuff, I mean, we can whip up a little frog for Amanda. I'm just saying, some diversity might be good in the ranks, especially if Assistant Groyper is, facing prosecution. I'm just saying, Amanda's around. Well, folks, that brings us to the end here. If you've made it this far, you have now sat through hours of content, walking through meticulously the timeline of notable moments in Nick Fuentes' arc into political prominence. We hope that you learned something that helps you better understand who Nick is and however you feel about that. So you've been listening for a couple hours. You can imagine how much time it takes to put together this episode, whether it is the pre-production or the editing that I'm going to do when we stop recording. We have a tip jar donation link in the description of this episode. Even if it's $1, we'd appreciate, whatever you find in your hearts that you're able to give us so that we can keep making episodes like this and deliver more Who the Hell Is episodes. So before we get out of here, Amanda, thank you for joining the show today. It's been great to have potentially an up-and-coming Groyper general help us, steer through all of this stuff. Your reporting on it has been really fantastic. And frankly, I mean, at a time where so much of the far right beat in media has cratered, it's like a breath of fresh air to me when I get to read one of your stories, because it's like what it's supposed to be, right? It's like this is get to the heart of some shit, right? And I appreciate it so much. Where can people read the great reporting that you're doing and follow you and keep tabs on what you're up to and be able to see the next things you publish?
Well, I am No Turtle Soup 17 on every platform imaginable, even the ones I don't use.
Hold on, pause. No Turtle Soup 17. There's a story.
When I was undercover, I used the Franklin the Turtle avatar from the kids' books, and I went by Frank. So, and then there's this is an episode of Alex Jones. Owen Schroyer has a pet turtle, and Alex is hammered out of his mind and is like, "Oh, and do you want to go get steaks later?" And Owen's like, "I have to go feed my turtle. Can I feed my turtle?" And Alex takes off his shirt and is yelling about eating turtle soup. So I was like, well, that's fucked up because, I'm Frank the Turtle. So there's that. And then 17 is, of course, the QAnon number. So I went with 17.
It's pretty good.
No Turtle Soup was taken, obviously.
Pretty good cover. So No Turtle Soup 17 on social platforms. Everything. Where are you publishing these days? How can people read your work?
I have a Substack that I don't use very much, so sorry in advance if you go to it, but it's turtlediaries.net. And then, I post my other writing on social media, so that's where you can find me.
Sweet. Thanks for joining us, Amanda. And listeners, if you have ideas for the next Who the Hell Is episode, somebody we should spend a god-awful amount of time researching and producing an episode about, reach out to me or Mike on social media, or you can reply to the Substack emails with the episodes on them, and that gets forwarded into my inbox. We're reachable. Reach out to us. Take care, guys.